and welcome to Scholesy Talks. I'm not sure if I went live a minute ago. I was a little bit confused. But I'll give you a wee intro to what this stream's going to be about, what this podcast is about. And so I did a little test video in the week. Not sure if anybody saw it, but it was super fun. So I am a wrestling mark. That means a guy that's crazy for wrestling merchandise. I literally watch wrestling YouTube like a crackhead. I'm always trying to find some news or something along the lines. I love wrestling Twitter. Absolutely everything about wrestling. I love the storylines. I love the wrestling. Everything. I grew up in the 90s, so we only had 3 promotions, really. 3 big promotions, what you'd say, that were available apart from indie wrestling, which I'll get to that in a minute. But the 3 promotions were ECW, WWF, and WCW. Used to watch WCW like a nerd, just after Cartoon Network. Every week, pretty much. We're a week behind in the UK. Used to readily get available WWF anyway, and then ECW had to be like some psycho crackhead to get hold of the tapes or the DVDs or anything like that. But I grew up in a time period where you could go to Butlins. Butlins in the UK is like a holiday camp, and there used to always consistently be wrestling there. So I used to go to Skegness, and there would always be a wrestling event there, and it's sort of like I fell in love with wrestling. And I was born in a place called Bedford, but I lived in loads of children's homes. So I actually grew up for a small time in my life in a place called Wisbeach, and we used to always go down to Norwich and Ipswich and Kings Lynn and stuff like that to watch indie events. So wrestling is pretty much always been there. And my mum and dad were major wrestling fans as well. They love Big Daddy, they love Giant Haystacks. I've got the Epic Toy Shellers of them behind, because they remind me of my mum and dad in that sense. And that is kind of what I'm about. I love it. My kids love wrestling and as well. So this is what our family's about. This is what our passion's about. Scholesy Talks has been around for a fair while in 3 different ways. I kind of sort of like I've never got a firm handle on what Scholesy Talks is about. Till very recently, when I started another podcast with my friend called Josh, called Don't Call Me a Diva. And Don't Call Me a Diva is a podcast about women. So if you never hear me mention women's wrestling, if you never hear me mention women's wrestling specifically on this show or on the Friday show, that's the reason why. There is a podcast called Don't Call Me a Diva. It's available on YouTube. It's available on Spotify. It's available on iTunes. It's a great little podcast where 2 guys are sitting there promoting, giving a lot of passion about women's wrestling. It's a great podcast, and in all fairness. Yeah, so this podcast is going to be about pro wrestling. It's going to be about merchandise I buy in the week. It's going to be about my favourite matches. And originally, I was going to base this around AEW and Ring of Honor, but I sort of came to a conclusion the last few days. I've changed my mind because I watch so much wrestling. Okay, it's unfair for me to sort of like just narrowly put it down to one promotion. So the promotions that I tend to watch on a weekly basis are Major League Wrestling. Great promotion. Great promotion. If you're into Roman Reigns, the Fatu family and stuff like that, you've got people like Lance there. You've got Jacob there as well, apart from that family. You've got guys like Mace Warner, absolute great wrestler, great deathmatch guy as well. You'll see him in GCW as well. GCW is another one I try to watch their weekly stuff on Fight TV. NWA on a Tuesday and a Saturday, and all their pay-per-views. Passion like a nut job for that promotion. It is a throwback promotion, and it's a healthy throwback promotion as well. It's not like it's not crap, basically. It's very, 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 very good. And it is very exciting as well as a promotion generally. Their current champion is Tyrus, which you might know him as Brody's Clay, Funkadactyls, WWE. The champions before that, we had Trevor Murdoch. You might know him from WWE as a tag champion. We had Matt Cardona, which you'll know as Zack Ryder. We had Nick Aldis, the first ever world in a big promotion, world champion that was British, also in Gladiators and various other promotions. And I believe he was also the youngest ever New Japan Pro Wrestling tag champion with Doug Williams, great wrestler. So that's it. That's NWA. It's another show I watch. I also watch Impact Wrestling with a passion, with a crazy passion, because after WCW went, I stayed around to watch WWE, but WWE for me never quite did it. It was never gritty enough as ECW or WCW. So I kind of waited around, and I was watching WWE, WWF on the weeks on, but I fell in love with TNA. And I fell in love with guys like Jeff Jarrett. And I love Jeff Jarrett from WWE. But I fell in love with Jeff Jarrett. I thought Jeff Jarrett, when he was in TNA, he was himself more than anything else. He had the power because it was his promotion to be who he wanted to be. And it was such an awesome show. And I mean, I was just saying on Twitter that I believe that the best version of Kurt Angle was on TNA. I thought it was absolutely a remarkable wrestler. I think he went from being a middle top carder to being a top carder. And then you had Christopher Daniels, you had Frankie Kazarian, you had the great future Hall of Famer AJ Styles, and there is no debate that you have to put him in that top 10 greatest wrestlers of all time. AJ Styles, I think he's literally done it in every promotion that matters now via maybe AEW. And another promotion I watch as well on a consistent basis is AEW, and I think any wrestling fan currently that is a mark that wants to watch wrestling. I know quite a lot of Brits watch it, okay, in itself, like myself, AEW, and I think AEW offers a little bit of everything for everybody, and I think that is one of their major gains, but it's also one of their major downfalls, because I think they haven't quite found their identity as a promotion, but that promotion will be fighting with WWE sooner rather than later, because I think it has everything it needs. I mean, look at their world champion currently. It is MJF. And MJF, there is no debate about this. He's top 3 best heels currently in pro wrestling. Yes, I will say this, Roman Reigns, Dominic Mysterio do come on top of him currently, but MJF is like, 24, 25, 26. The time that he's 30 years old, he's going to be possibly the greatest heel in professional wrestling. All right, and he's top 3 most definitely now. Okay, I mean, and as I've said before, I'm majorly into mid-card belts, and I think their TNT division, and I think their Mid-Atlantic, or is it Mid-Atlantic, or the international belt, all right, is also something that is incredibly important in that element, and it's going to grow. And these are the wrestling shows I watch, and I'm also a major mark for Ring of Honor. I saw Ring of Honor when it's come to the UK on various occasions. I fell in love with people like Christopher Daniels, Frankie Kazarian, Loki, Homicide, guys like that from that promotion. And one of my all-time favourite wrestlers is Nigel McGuinness. And Nigel McGuinness with his pure title stuff, absolutely brilliant. I was in Liverpool when he was fighting Bryan Danielson back in the day. So that is what you're looking at when I look at wrestling. But I also love streaming networks. So, I mean, Fight TV, Premier Streaming Network, these guys show us wrestling events that are a bit different, a bit cheeky, a bit interesting in that sense. And I won't lie, I'm major into gimmicks. I'm major into gimmick wrestling. I love guys like the Blue Meanie, a massive Blue Meanie fan, massive BWO fan. I loved everything he did with Goldust back in the day when he was Blue Dust. I actually have a nice little cheeky bit of art that I got commissioned for the St. Massacre match back in '99. I believe it was '99, if my memory serves correctly. And I always say to people that's one of my favourite ever sort of like matches. I think it's for nostalgic reasons more than anything else. And I think the story, the gimmick, and absolutely everything, and how it felt of that time period, how it was recorded. It kind of sounds really silly how I say this. I've rewatched it very recently. It's got back at the '90s had everything felt a bit mysterious, a bit cheeky, a bit mysterious, and that's how I felt about it. But yeah, so I was massive into gimmick wrestling, like wrestlers that have funny characters, gimmick characters, and such as I loved Goldust when he was with Booker, man. Man, that was great stuff. That was artistic element. Like, I'm a major fan of Orange Cassidy as well. But I mean, as I said to you, I've sort of fell out of love with WWE. I mean, and there was a very few wrestlers that I tuned in for. I tuned in for, interestingly enough, Zack Ryder. I used to love Zack Ryder. I used to love his Z True Online Story stuff that was on YouTube. I thought that was just incredibly high quality stuff, and I respected every element about that guy because that guy knew how to do self-promotion. And that is one of the most important things in professional wrestling is self-promotion, especially now, like he's on the indie scene, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I also love TNA's Curryman. I mentioned Curryman because I think it's one of them things. It's a ridiculous gimmick, but it was fun. It was fun. But I want to talk about, before I get into my favourite matches of the week or anything like that, I want to talk about stuff that I've purchased in the last week, or not in the last week, in the last couple of months that's come this week. And I'm not going to lie, not much has come this week. Apart from a couple of t-shirts and a baseball cap. I like baseball caps and stuff like that, but I'm major into action figures as well. And I got a fair few on pre-order, but nothing's actually come. So I want to talk about that quickly, and then I want to talk about my favourite matches, what I've enjoyed about this week, and stuff like that when it comes to the wrestling industry. But let's start with having a look at a couple of t-shirts that I got. So as I said to you, I have a podcast that is directly about female wrestlers, and I've been getting quite a lot of sort of action figures and stuff like that are female wrestlers recently. So I'm getting the micro brawlers, so I'm trying to get a lot of them. So I've got Angela Love, I've got Rosemary, I've got Awesome Kong, I've got quite a few coming in that sense. But I had to get myself a Trinity for Two t-shirt. And the reason why I got myself a Trinity for Two t-shirt is, as I said a minute ago, I believe that she can do a Kurt Angle, man. I believe that she can come into Impact Wrestling and be Kurt Angle. But I don't want to go too much into this because I've talked about this and Don't Call Me a Diva. I also got myself, and this is a buzz, this t-shirt, because I personally think she is the best female wrestler in the industry currently, the best. So I got a Ring of Honor Athena t-shirt. I just love everything about her as a wrestler, everything about her in the sense of character. And you know what? I loved her as Ember Moon in NXT, but it's sort of like WWE don't give characters like that a chance nowadays. Back in the day, they did. The Ember Moon, I personally think, would have been like a Gold Dusty sort of character. They would have loved. They would have used her. Maybe had a bit of a gimmicky sort of feel, but they would have used her like hell. She would have had tag belts. She would have had something. It would have been there for her. But that's not the way it went. But she's doing awesome in Ring of Honor. And I also had to get myself a Ring of Honor cap. This is going to be my baseball cap for when I go to All In AEW, I think. This is going to be the one that I'm going to be wearing, which I'm very excited about All In AEW. If you listen to any of my podcasts or anything like that, you'll know how excited I actually am by that. But I want to start today talking about my favourite match of the week. And interestingly enough, go back 30 seconds ago when I was talking about gimmick matches. Is a very gimmick match. I want to talk about my favourite current streaming network, and I think it's going to stay my favourite current streaming network for a hell of a long time because I think it's going to be the next big thing. Premier Streaming Network is a network that was started by Josh Chernoff. If you don't know who Josh Chernoff was, he did a kind of sarcastic talk show about pro wrestling news, and he still does it. So says Chernoff, or something along the lines of that. And it was absolutely hilarious. He's got this ability to be deadpan sarcastic in a heel format, and it was brilliant. I loved. He had a little bit of beef with Meltzer, which makes me happy because I think Meltzer's a pain in the ass when it comes to the pro wrestling industry. And he started this network, and recently, I believe in December, not recently, 6-7 months ago, December, Freddie Prinze Jr., Scooby-Doo, I can't remember who played in Scooby-Doo. He played the blonde one with white top in Scooby-Doo, that guy, and Sarah Michelle Gellar's fella. He won't like probably saying that, but I always say to my missus when I'm explaining that, she's a big Buffy fan, the guy that's married to Sarah Michelle Gellar, but he's also, he bought into the network as well. But he has this absolutely awesome podcast because he spent some time as creative in WWE or WWF, whichever era it was for him. And he talks about a lot of that concept of going in there and talking to the lads, teaching them about acting, teaching them about stuff like that. And I think it's really, really helpful from that perspective, because then we start into our head as fans, us marks, understanding actually what creative does in pro wrestling. And I think creative in pro wrestling is super important. But Freddie Prinze Jr., Josh Chernoff own that company. Also going to have to give a shout out. Josh Chernoff did a lot for me in COVID. What I mean by that is he and the Blue Meanie, one of my all-time favourites, started an absolutely incredible podcast called The Mind of the Meanie. And basically, it wasn't just about pro wrestling. It was about music. It was about sport. It was about so much stuff. And I think what it came for me, it became sort of a support barrier in the element of, Meanie's on at 9 o'clock tonight, or whatever. And I learned so much. I've learned so much about things like Van Halen. Interestingly, I've always loved Van Halen, but Meanie is sort of like a guru when it comes to Van Halen. Knows loads about Van Halen, and I learned so much about the wrestling industry. And stuff like that. I also learned quite a lot about baseball and American football and stuff like that. And I think it's that thing, and Philadelphia itself, which gives me a passion to go to Philadelphia, because I learned stuff. But Josh Chernoff and the Blue Meanie COVID, absolutely brilliant. But I'm talking about the FWF pay-per-view. So the FWF, if you don't know what it started on the Major Wrestling Figure podcast, and it was basically what we all did as kids, okay, when we built rosters and played with our action figures. And it started off like that. And Brian Myers, Smart Mark Sterling and Matt Cordona, what they would be doing is they'd be telling stories, okay, we're basically doing a bit of fig photography, putting their figures in positions and stuff like that. And it was absolutely fantastic. And when COVID sort of like came out of bounds, what I understand is they did the FWF pay-per-views, man. And I think this is number 5 that we're currently on, but it was a super awesome show all in all. I've watched all 5 of them. They're just super fun, and I believe they're done in Creator Pro's training sort of like area. That's Brian Myers and I believe Pat Buck's training sort of like association, where interestingly enough people like Chris Statlander, who else we got, Chris Statlander, sort of like Max Caster, MJF all came out of in that element, and I believe some members of the Dark Order as well. And I believe it's done in that location. But I want to talk about a particular wrestler. I followed him for a fair old while, and he's called Phil Cardigan, man. And I heard this great little story on the Major Wrestling Figure podcast this week, that basically Brian Myers said he is one of them guys. He came in and he has a great comeback story, because his gimmick was pants. All right, his original gimmick was pants, whatever that was. I can't quite remember. And he was okay at wrestling, but he sort of like improved himself, built this character called Phil Cardigan. If you jump on YouTube, it's absolutely hilarious, his highlight reel. He talks about his CV in this bit of it, and he's talking to a puppet basically, and he hands over his CV, because it's sort of like the logic of you go into a wrestling company, it's sort of like, here's my CV, this is what I've done, and the puppet goes to him, well, that's paper thin, and he basically lobs the thing, and then he talks about his missus basically being boned by the mailman, and then I believe he talks about sort of like being bottle fed till he's 24, and I think it's absolutely hilarious. And do you know what? If I was going to say one thing to this Phil Cardigan, if I ever met the guy, he does follow me on Twitter, interestingly enough, which I didn't quite realise this. If I was going to say, I would be focusing on doing that flipping YouTube, because you are hilarious. Every bit about what you offer in wrestling is hilarious. You are actually a talented wrestler as well. You're funny, you've got a good gimmick. It's everything a pro wrestling company wants. And if I owned my own company, I would be signing you. That's how I feel about Phil Cardigan. But he was versus Matt Cordona, aka Zack Ryder. Zack Ryder's dead. Okay, just to let you know. All right, do you know what I'm saying? The Deathmatch King, the indie god, the guy that's basically changed the industry in a lot of ways, and along with guys like Josh Chernoff, he's one of the most hardest working guys in the industry. He is constant. He is constant. He is on every indie promotion that actually matters. He has made GCW from being good to being incredible, and I don't think it took much for him to do that, but that's what he did, and I think that is super important. And you can't not like him. All right, do you know what I mean? You can't not like him when it comes down to it. And this match was one of them weird matches. So Phil Cardigan called him out for 3 of Matt Kona's 1 million belts, which he has about 1 million belts, and it was just super good. So they come in. This is how the match goes, pretty much. It's a very gimmicky match, and I love gimmick matches, so it's great. And you've got to remember, it's a wrestling figure, sort of like based around pay-per-view. So this is what made it better and more important in a lot of ways. So they sort of enter the ring. There's a poke. There's a mocking slam. All right. Matt takes off Phil Cardigan's glasses, and then Phil Cardigan's sort of like walking around the floor, looking for. And what's happening is every time he's looking for his glasses on the floor, Matt's coming in, bang on the floor, missing, bang on the floor, missing, bang off the floor, missing. It's sort of like, and then you see Matt come off the top ropes, and Phil Cardigan sort of counters whatever Matt's going to do into a Boston Crab. And that's the thing. That's why it's hilarious. There's an amazing scene in there as well where Phil drinks coffee, and when he drinks the coffee, I believe it's coffee anyway, he hulks up. We see a great little sort of advertising from the Major Figure podcast. They have a new product called the Big Rubber Guys. I believe they're sort of like LJNE sort of like figures, which I am going to order. But I need money to order, and I currently don't have any money. So if there is any available in the next couple of weeks, I will probably be ordering at least a mat. Okay, I'm not sure if I can push out for a Brian, but I will be ordering at least a mat because I've got a section in my downstairs for Matt Cardona in that sense. And we get that out, and then sort of like Phil's sort of playing with a toy in his back, and then sort of like it's countered, and Matt whacks the toy in his gob. And it's super funny. It's just super funny. And there was radio silence was hit. Matt Cardona tries to drink the coffee of Phil, and basically it's disgusting. It's awful. And the sort of the match gets interesting at this point because we see Sunil come in towards the end of the match. Matt's pooing himself, goes into the corner thinking Sunil's going to beat the crap out of him because they have beef from a previous FWF. And Sunil's actually on Matt's side, all right, and helps Matt get the win. And we hear afterwards in the sort of promo afterwards that Sunil is now the broski of the week. If you watch the old Long Island story, you will know what that's about. But this match was heavily gimmicked, all right. It was a major promotion for everything, the FWF, the Major League Wrestling, the Major Brothers, all of them guys, what they do, and that's why it was awesome. That's why it was generally awesome. We had Josh Chernoff on the sort of like on the commentary, and his commentary was hilarious because he was just worried about the next Premier Streaming title sort of like pay-per-view-y sort of thing that's coming up. He was worried about that. So what if Matt Cardona is not the Premier Streaming Network Showcase champion? Okay, it'll be Phil Cardigan, and no one wants to see Phil Cardigan. And he was worrying just like a sort of like a CEO, a director. It's a character, but it's funny, it's good stuff. And that was my wrestling match of the week. And the reason why it was my wrestling match of the week, because it was heavily gimmicked. It was just good, fun wrestling. It was a good laugh to watch. It was easy TV. And the problem is sometimes with pro wrestling now, they try to be so clever, it becomes not easy watching TV. I'm not going to lie, I'll be dead honest, I sometimes struggle to watch the MJF promos because they're so clever. Alright, they are very intelligent. I just want easy watching TV. And another thing I want to throw out about the FWF pay-per-view, FWF Live, was I heavily enjoyed the segment where Smart Mark Sterling got kidnapped, taken to a toy store by Jay George, and basically was getting tortured. And CPA, one of the great talents that I hope somebody grabs eventually. CPA comes in and saves his ass. Basically, starts beating people up with the LJNs, the big rubber guys. There's a great line in it where they say something along the lines of, "Well, these LJNs can be used as weapons," and just it was just super fun, man. It was just super fun. All right, it's just a good old, okay, gimmicky pro wrestling element. I mean, that's the great thing about the indies and the great thing about these independent shows such as this, is that the fan base love gimmicks. It's not all fans wanting pure rules wrestling of Ring of Honor, which I love, have a passion for. Okay, sometimes we want easy watching TV, and that's the great thing about pro wrestling. Is genre, man. Is genre. We have everything that possibly we would want to in the 21st century. Okay, I was saying this on Twitter the other day. That is the thing about pro wrestling. We have gimmick wrestling. We have guys like Dan Housen doing great stuff. All right, we have like Dan the Dad doing great stuff. Another great indie wrestler. Check the man out. We also, in the indie scene, the gimmick stuff works and it's perfect and it's fun and it's worth listening to, watching and enjoying in that sense. And also we have things like deathmatch wrestling, okay, GCW, ZZW back in the day. We also have quite a lot of it in the north of England where I currently live, with the North Wrestling and stuff like that. And then we have like the bigger promotions such as Impact, AEW, WWE, which gives you what I call TV wrestling. And there's nothing wrong with TV wrestling. TV wrestling is a super fun product. It's a super fun product, and it is made for the viewer in the sense of watching it through a screen. And again, there is nothing wrong about that kind of stuff. Now, I've watched so much this week, I can't remember everything. So I have pretty much watched Major League. I've watched NWA. I have watched Dynamite. Dynamite was class this week, actually. Go and watch that. But I will sort of go into something I particularly love this week. So I've said to you I'm a TNA guy. All right. And one of the things that I'm currently loving, okay, I'm just putting this up so I get what I'm saying, right. Something I'm currently loving is the old school TNA boys in AEW. I mean, I love Jay Lethal, legend, Ring of Honor TNA. Jeff Jarrett, just the WWE, WCW, TNA, Global Force, AEW, everything, NWA, whatever, pro wrestling legend. And then you got Dart, TNA champion, you got Singh, and you got Karen. And I'm loving this element of the storyline that's currently going on with these guys. I was heavily disappointed when a lot of people were not loving the FTR match that they had previously, because I think the FTR match, it might not have been FTR's thing or what I would call the mat wrestling fans thing, but it was a good match. It was solid, and it built a storyline with Aubrey Edwards. And I know a lot of people are a bit funky and a bit funny and are not overly happy that a referee's getting a bit of a cheeky storyline here, but Aubrey Edwards is awesome, man. Have you heard her on AEW Restricted? Have you heard her sort of talking about computer games and stuff like that? She is a awesome human being, okay? An awesome wrestler. And you know what? At the end of the day, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be dead honest. All right. Hefner. All right. People are complaining currently about Aubrey Edwards being too into things. Hefner, man. He was heavily into everything. All right. Into everything. Look what he did in TNA, man. WWE as well. He was heavily into everything. All right. As people bitching and moaning because she's a female referee doing it, I don't know. But Aubrey Edwards is the modern day Hefner. I love her with a passion. So I'm loving this storyline with Karen Jarrett. Love Karen Jarrett. Good call by Tony Khan, Jeff, all of the creative team for bringing her in. Smart storytelling, smart business, because she is incredibly good. Incredibly good. Love it, hate it. She is incredibly good. She can act. She can also make you hate her. One of the biggest talents in the world in pro wrestling. Okay, so we look at the minute. Dominic Mysterio has made the world hate him. And Karen Jarrett has that talent as well. I love Renee as well. And Renee opens this brilliantly. Renee has this great ability to sit there and say what she has to say and make you interested. I think she's one of probably the best presenters, interviewers in the wrestling industry. I think there's no debate about that at all. I think, in all fairness, I would probably pop her on commentary at some point because I think she could be very, very helpful in the commentary element because she has that ability to be one of them people that isn't a wrestler, right, but know about wrestling. Okay, and I think that's quite hard. I think that's quite hard in the wrestling industry. You look at a lot of commentators now, they are former wrestlers. I mean, look, Tony Schiavone, Jim Ross, guys like that, you don't count. They're the old school. But a lot of the guys like Taz, I mean, Excalibur was a wrestler fundamentally as well. McGuinness was a wrestler. I mean, I know Ian Rick Marley wasn't, and he might have been. I'm not sure, but it's that core concept. I would probably put Renee into that element. But yeah, so she opens up this interview with there's a lot of drama. And Karen comes across with sort of like saying dramatic diva, referring to Edwards, and we've just said how awesome Edwards is anyway. And she kind of wants to finish this right now. Mark Briscoe comes out and show up, man. They're doing such a good thing with him. Look, rest in peace, Jay. Jay Briscoe. I mean, one of the greatest wrestlers. I say great a lot, and I do apologise about that because I think majority of wrestlers are great or they have the ability to be great. But Jay was a great wrestler, and he was one of them guys. He stayed with one company for a hell of a long time, and he was world champion, tag champion. He did so much for the business for the sake of Ring of Honor as well. He had some barn burkers. People like Kevin Sheen, Kevin Owens loved him. Everybody loved these boys because what they did was they showed the ability and they adapted the business. But Briscoe comes out, and Briscoe basically reiterates what Edwards says when she comes out, such as, I'm not allowed to wrestle you, basically. But Mark comes out and says this. He goes, look, man, singles, but not trio tag team. And then sort of like Duck goes, I'll wrestle. And then he pussies out quite quickly. And then he goes, yeah, Jay, Karen, Jeff. And I'm sound with that. That's cool. I mean, I love Duck, but them three I prefer to see in that sense. And then sort of like Mark goes, I'll wrestle. Edwards will wrestle. Okay. And this is the best bit. This is the most beautiful bit about this bloody segment. And this segment was my favourite bit of the whole entire Rampage, just to add, okay, was Papa Briscoe. Papa Briscoe's the man. If you ever watch any sort of like the Briscoe farm sort of like clips or anything like that, the cinematic sort of like elements, it's absolutely gorgeous concepts all the way through it. And I think this is the important thing about segments. So pro wrestling, let's talk pro wrestling for a second, where I think that segment was my favourite of the week, and the FWF match was my favourite wrestling match of the week because it was just fun. Let's talk about segments. Let's talk about the important things in pro wrestling segments. I mean, so at school they teach my kids about connecting words, and that's what a segment is. It's a connecting word. It's a connecting word of a story. I find it very difficult when a wrestling promotion doesn't build a story. You can build a story in the ring, and that will always be artistically brilliant. Okay, there's no debate about that. You get Doug Williams in a ring, or Nigel McGuinness in a ring, or Bryan Danielson in a ring, or Claudio in a ring, all right, and you ask them to do a technical match, okay? You ask them to build something in that match. They will be able to build it, and they will build a beauty of a match. But that's only one element of professional wrestling. The second element of professional wrestling is the segment. It's the storytelling. It's doing the promos. Like, look, Dusty Rhodes, Hard Times. Cream to the top. Rises to the top. Randy Savage. The Pipe Bomb. CM Punk. MJF, CM Punk. Promos. Absolutely beautiful stuff. Artistically beautiful. And I think that is what's important about a promo, what's important about a segment. It fills the gap for the story. And this is why wrestling needs them. This is why wrestling needs them. And I mean, if the segments... if the segments are sort of like Goldust and sort of like Booker T and a little scrap, or if the segment is Jeff Jarrett, Karen, Jay, Edwards doing whatever they've got to do, or if the segment is Booker T and Stone Cold Steve Austin having a fight in a shop. Do you know what I mean? That's what's important. Or if the segment, for example, is something to do with the NWO, that's the important concept. So professional wrestling isn't about just wrestling moves. It's also about the incredible ability to tell a story. And it's not just with fists, it's with words. It's with words. I remember Stan Lee once saying that if Shakespeare was about these days, he would be writing comic books. All right, and I'm a comic book guy as well. You can see them all here, my beauties. All right, but I think that about pro wrestling as well. If Shakespeare was around today, he would be the head of creative of WWE, TNA, AEW, Impact, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Major League Wrestling, NWO, because that is the thing. The art of pro wrestling isn't just in the ring. It's everything. It's you walking out. It's you, okay, listening to the music. And then it's the promo, it's the storytelling. And that's why I think that segment was important. People might think it was silly. There was just these little bits and bobs when Jeff walks out with his guitar. Important. But yeah, that's how I feel about wrestling segments. I probably went on for a hell of a lot of time there. But I also want to talk about something else I really, 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 really loved. And I'm not going to go into the match because I don't think I need to go into the match. But I love Billy Gunn and I love Acclaimed. I love everything that Billy is doing with the Acclaimed. And I think Billy's an important concept to the Acclaimed. And some might disagree, and I'm happy with that. But why is Billy important to the Acclaimed? Now, I think Billy's had one of the most fun and interesting careers in wrestling. Right? Look, man, he is a beautiful specimen for like a late 50-year-old, mate. Man's muscly as hell. Okay, knows how to look after himself. But he has the ability to build a gimmick. He has an ability to build a gimmick. Look, Generation X, man. Do you know what I'm saying? Him and Chuck, absolutely brilliant. A very controversial storyline, and people might find it offensive these days, but absolutely brilliant. Okay, Mr. Ross, absolutely brilliant. Cute Kip in TNA, brilliant. And I think he helps the Acclaimed quite a lot with that stuff. He doesn't need to say anything to build something. And in the sense of the Sesame Daddy stuff, fantastic. So the Acclaimed when they come out with Billy, the Acclaimed when they do their bits and bobs, brilliant stuff. And I think Rampage, for me, was probably one of the stronger shows of the week. Because they got everything right. Everything right, I think, from matches to everything. I mean, I'm just looking at my notes at the matches, and I was going to talk about the matches, but I don't see any point, really. I mean, the match at the start, Bandito, the Lucha Brothers versus Big Bill Page and Lee Moriarty, absolutely brilliant. But the most important thing about that match was Matt and Jeff coming out, talking about the gift. The gift that they gave, sort of like the gift that they specifically gave Page about the wrist things that sort of like Jeff was, and then Page loses the match for that reasoning. And then, I mean, Bandito, man, I just want to say this: former Ring of Honor champion, absolutely beautiful and talented and incredibly creative wrestler. I mean, the Lucha Brothers, we know who they are, so skillful. But that match was really, really important for that reason. And another sort of like segment, actually, I'm forgetting about this segment because, do you know what? I wrote it down in my notes. I love this probably more than anything else in the match. And actually, maybe I feel like I've sort of like done some wrong here, not actually explaining this. QTTV on Rampage, man. Bloody hell. All right. I'm not going to lie. I think it's a bit peculiar. I think it's a bit odd. I don't really understand why it's there, but I kind of get it. It is humorous. It makes jokes. A couple of weeks ago, it makes a Blue Meanie joke, and I was sort of like, wow, it's got some good jokes. But QT Marshall, we know him from Ring of Honor. We know him as one of the senior producers of AEW. We know him for being the leader of the Factory, which I'm not sure the Factory exists now. But he has a small group of people, okay, that are basically Power Hop's promotional team, I'm assuming, and they make some really, really funny jokes. They talk about Jim Ross spilling coffee. They talk about ice cream. Okay, when CM Punk bought everybody ice cream. Talk about Edge in 1997. So there's some really funny comic-based elements to it. But yeah, I mean, wrestling has been flipping good this week. And do you know what, guys? Download Premier Streaming Network. Go and watch FWF. Alright, look, man, it is like $10.99 or something a month, but it is worth the money. It is worth the money. It has a lot of stuff. It has a lot of podcasts on there as well. I'm really obsessed with Bobby Fish's podcast at the minute, which I think is absolutely very good. I'm a big fan of Bobby Fish. It's a shame that sort of like he's not still in AEW and all that sort of jazz. But yeah, this is what the shows are going to be about each week. I'm going to talk about wrestling merch that I bought. I'm going to talk about my favourite matches. I'm going to talk about my favourite segments. I'm going to talk about gimmicks. I'm going to talk about whatever. But listen, guys, if you have enjoyed this 44 minutes of me talking about a lot of stuff, okay, please like and subscribe, all right? Please leave a comment or whatever, all right? I really am so thankful for whoever's listening, whoever wants to listen, and whoever wants to be involved. My name is Scholesy, and this is what we talk about wrestling.